everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and well, we're gonna play around with something a little different for me today. I want to play around with a few different Shibori-like techniques when it comes to yarn dyeing. And using the term Shibori for this is probably inappropriate. But Shibori is a technique where you fold and wrap fabric in string and then dye it, and you can create these beautiful patterns based on the resist and the way that it was folded and the way that it was wrapped. One of the ones I really like that I haven't tried myself is wrapping fabric around a pole like this, and as you wrap the string around, you scrunch it up, so then there's only little bits of the fabric exposed. Now, this is obviously going to be different when we're using yarn, but I figured let's try wrapping yarn around a bunch of different items, maybe also throw like a hand-wound ball into the mix, and we'll dye them and we'll see what kind of patterns we create. Today's episode of Dyepot Weekly is sponsored by Roseanne, and we are going to be dyeing 100 grams of Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn in total. This yarn is 100% Peruvian highland wool. And of all the yarn bases I dye, since this is non-superwash, it will absorb color slower, which means we could see some more spread with the techniques. But the rate that the colors absorb will depend both on the colors that we pick, the vinegar and the heat, and how much yarn has access to the dye at a given time. So it's going to be interesting. I expect the results might be fairly similar across these different techniques, but it's going to be a lot of fun to try it out. If you would like to learn more about how you as a viewer can sponsor an episode of Dyepot Weekly and get 100 grams of yarn dyed in the video plus shout outs, you can find a link to the listing in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop in the video description and in the top right hand corner of your screen. So the different elements I have are a large 1 1/4 inch PVC pipe tube, which I bought specifically for playing with Shibori, even though we're just going to be doing yarn today. I've got one of the 1/2 inch PVC pipes. This is what I use for all of my nitty knotties. I've got a wooden like paint stirring stick. And I've got a plastic lid, and I hope to wrap the yarn around it in more of a disc shape. Previously, the shapes that we've done involved yarn cakes, where on the outside you have access to some of all the yarn all the way through, and then a hand-wound yarn ball, where you have one end that is in the center and the other end is more on the outside, with a random resist pattern because of the way that you're winding up the ball. And in each of these, I'm curious how they'll look. And there's definitely potential for manipulation and playing with each of these. Again, I'm not sure if we're going to see big differences between each of them. I have a feeling they will all feel semi-similar to a hand-wound ball of yarn, but we won't know until we try. One perk of using mini skeins is that we can experiment with all of these different wrapping techniques, see what we like, see what we don't like, and it's just a learning process. Now, I do think I want to use a different color for each of these examples, which somewhat negates a comparison between them, but I think it'll just be more fun to look at and will make it easier for me to keep track of which one is which. If it looks like there are some big differences between some of them, then we can revisit them using the same dye color at some point in the future. For each of the techniques, I am going to take about 20 grams and wrap it around. I'm going to sort of try something a little loose. I want to stay near, oh, I could even wrap like this. I want to stay nearish one end and sort of go back and forth, not pulling too tightly, but I will proceed with this for 20 grams. Okay, I think I've changed up my plan. I am going to do, for each of the 4 wrappings, maybe I'll add a 5th one in. I'm going to do 10 grams, and then I'm going to do a 50-gram hand-wound ball. It's a bit laborious to wrap around these sticks. Thankfully, I think the unwrapping at the end will be a lot easier. And now I am going to start wrapping around the big one. I'm doing a combination between twisting and then wrapping. It's just the twisting is a lot easier like this when I'm on camera. I have something that could be a fun idea. You could actually dip dye these, which would be cool. Huh. Okay, for this disc, we'll start going like this, but then my plan is to turn and it's not going to be done in a sort of ordered way. But the plan is to keep wrapping around like this. And this one is actually substantially easier than the more sticks, so I think I might go ahead and do 20 grams on this one. Okay, this one is wild. So the lid sort of curved up. You can move it a bit, but it's interesting because there's like some pockets in the center where dye in theory could get through. So this one has 20 grams of yarn, and then the other 3 are 10 grams each. And now finally, I am going to create a hand wound ball with the remaining 50 grams. Okay, we have 3 wrapped sticks of various sizes that each have 10 grams of the yarn, a 50-gram hand wound ball. This one we've seen before, so we have a sense of how that could turn out. Maybe I should have done a smaller one, but I wanted to have something in here that was a bit more predictable in terms of outcome. And then this disc, which really excites me because it's just a different shape. Now, again, will we be able to tell the difference in the yarn pattern from the shape? Probably not. There are probably subtle differences that would be hard to say by eye, but it's fun, and let's go set up some dye baths. In my dedicated dye pot, I have 16 cups of water, 3 tablespoons of white vinegar, and I'm now going to add a little over a tablespoon, so a heaping tablespoon of some delphinium blue dye, which I think is from Dharma. Now, we probably added about 17 milliliters of dye to our dye bath, which would be close to a 2% depth of shade. I mean, we're still far from it, like more like a 1.7, but still. And given that there's resist, well, we'll see. But I'm gonna go ahead and let this heat up before we add in our first wrapped stick. Okay, we are warming up. I'm actually gonna reduce the heat. And starting with our wooden stick, uh-oh. Well, I see a problem. Oh man, I can't fit the whole thing in. Okay, I need to get some more water. Here's another 8 cups of water. This one's gonna have an interesting effect to it because of the fact that only part was in at first. Ooh. See some color on the middle and less on the edges. That is interesting. It's like there is some just resist naturally because things might be a little bit tighter on those corners. But yeah, I mean, this is a dipstick, right? So I'm gonna roll it. Okay, I didn't quite consider about that top edge, but you know what? We'll leave it. That's gonna add something to the colorway and it's something to consider. I wonder, I did not consider the size of my pot when I was setting this up. But I will say the color is absorbing really slow. I guess what I said I had put 3 tablespoons of vinegar in there. Let's go ahead and add another one. I'll keep track of how much vinegar we're at in the video description because it's going to be hard for me to remember. But ooh, that's pretty. All right, I'm going to leave this here and we'll come back in about 15 minutes and see what's happening with our color. We are slowly getting more color here on our stick, but it's slow. I'm not super concerned per se. It's more of how long will this video take to film? One reason why I'm sort of hemming and hawing right now when it comes to this color is that I want to use the same dye bath for the other projects to conserve water and just for ease there. And so there's a few things that I could do with regards to that. One is at some point I can decide that this color is just done and we can leave some residual color in here, add some more color and carry on, which I think might be the way that we proceed, and sort of additively add colors and shift the hues as we go. Another option, and this is something that maybe I won't do at this stage since this blue is fairly neutral, it would be easy to add to it or cover it a little bit, but maybe then for the next color I could go and grab a skein of yarn that's a yarn mop to come in and suck up the rest of that color. And in fact, because I'm curious, I did go ahead and grab a yarn mop. Mainly, I'm curious how quickly this color might absorb to some superwash merino that we have on hand. That should help give me a sense of just how much color we have in here. And I will probably use the same mop multiple times over the course of this video. And so we can see that on here the color is fairly pastel, especially compared to the color, which is fairly pastel, but it is definitely deeper what we have here on our stick. And so that's probably why we're not seeing a lot of change. Delphinium blue is a paler color overall, but I think I'm gonna let this sit another 10-15 minutes and then we might go on to our next color, setting both our stick and our yarn mop aside as we do this. This is also handy because versus waiting for a really, really long period of time, some colors can stain the pot until you wash it as well. So this just gives us that amount of information. It was actually only about 5 minutes and I'm ready to call it. I am going to remove both our Shibori-esque yarn and you can see that our color has actually cleared a lot with the help of our yarn mop, and I will be setting both of these aside to cool. But right off the bat, I do think that we're going to get some really interesting patterns from the differences in the edge versus the flat sides of our stick, which is cool. For our next color, let's use some avocado green. I'm going to do, again, a heaping tablespoon of the color, and this is an old 1% stock solution. And now I've got our thicker PVC pipe color and I'm putting it in and am curling this through because once again we have a water volume issue. I think that what I might do, because I kind of want a hint of color towards the top, I'm just sort of spooning some on. I'm just spooning some color on to this top area just to wet it and have it get a little bit of color. And otherwise, while we wait over the next, let's start with 10 minutes, every once in a while I'm going to come and stir it, which will get a little bit of color on that midsection. But you can already tell that for the same amount of volume of dye, the avocado is much more of a concentrated color than the delphinium blue. This is going pretty well. We've got a cute little gradient thing going on here. Again, the color absorption is slow, but we'll leave it in longer and see where we end up. This is so fun. Just checking. I mean, there's so much liquid in here, it's hard to see if there's really much of any color left. So I'm going in for my still very warm yarn mop, and there's definitely color left. Like dipping this in, you can see that we're getting some green shades here on our mop. but I think that this is just a fun way to like help soak up the color, which is still ultimately very pastel with the shades that we have picked so far. But it's like a really nice sort of minty color on our mop. Okay, I'm gonna let this sit for, I don't know, for a little bit to let it soak up that color. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes. We've got a beautiful avocado-y green here on our stick. Ugh. And then our yarn mop is getting nice and layered. There's a tiny bit of yellow left behind in here, but I'm gonna go with that. And we'll be using this mop for other colors that come through. But let's use the tighter wound PVC pipe now. This time, let's go a bit more purpley. We're gonna use, again, about a tablespoon of Espresso Bean, which is a purplish brown color. And of the three we've done so far, is probably the most pigmented, I would think, of the colors. Now, this smaller PVC pipe, oh, okay, it is weighted enough to fit all the way in. I was a little concerned that it might float, but it is staying on the bottom really well. It's not really floating around. And there's just a tiny bit above the surface, which, again, I don't mind. And I don't think I'm gonna roll this one as much. Okay, maybe occasionally. I don't think I'm gonna be able to help myself, but let's leave it in and then we'll see what happens. All right. I think I'm gonna remove this now. Look how dark that free skein was. I'm gonna leave the rest in here. And, I'm thinking what color I might wanna add. All right, I'm not sure if this is gonna be enough to change the tone, but I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of Dharma Frozen to this purpley color, and I might make it more blue. We'll see when we add the yarn. Here is our little disc that's dry, hopefully. Ooh, what's that color? That's kind of cool. Hopefully it won't just completely melt. The water is warm, not so hot that I can't sort of poke it in. And okay, we're floating, but most is in the water and we can't really see what's going on. So I am curious. We're gonna leave this be. We'll come back in, I think, 20 minutes. Okay. I am going to remove this, which we've got this nice navy color. This is really, really pretty. I am going to take the yarn mop and go in. Ooh, I think that this will be really, really pretty. I am liking the way that these colors are all working together, but are all layering on our mop. So I'm gonna leave the mop in here, I think, for a good 10 minutes and see how much color we actually absorb. This color is getting delicious. It is so, so, so pretty. Oof. I love that it's this blend of all the other colors that we have used up until this point, which all look amazing together. It's warm back there, otherwise I would show you guys right now. Finally, we have our ball of yarn, which I'm gonna plop down really quick while I go and get our dye. Now, this color should be just below 50 grams. And as it's slowly sinking in, let's do just 2 heaping tablespoons of true black. And I'm gonna stir that up with our yarn there. And let's let this go for 20 minutes and we'll see what happens. Oh man, you can just barely see the cake right there. It is beneath the surface and I want to touch it so badly. But I'm refraining. I am restraining. I'm restraining. It hasn't quite been 20 minutes, but here we are using the same dye path the whole time. The water volume has definitely gone down, but the acid concentration should have been fairly consistent or maybe getting slightly smaller. We've added more volume from our dyes, but not a significant amount. I'm now going to add more acid to just under 3 tablespoons. We definitely can add more if we need to. Ooh. We're getting a nice charcoal gray on the outside so far. More color is probably sinking towards the center. But now with more acid, more color should kind of come onto that outside edge. So we will be back shortly. Well, actually, maybe not shortly, maybe like 10 minutes, but we'll come back. You still can't really see our little ball down there. One reason why the color is absorbing so much slower is because of a surface area and volume issue. There's a lot of dye in here, but there's also, you know, there's a lot of yarn, but there's limited yarn that the dye can access. And so it isn't really even just like a superwash issue. But now coming in with our greenish yarn into the black, we will soon see just how much is left over by seeing how much we absorb onto the superwash yarn, which, you know, the dye in here is fairly opaque still. So I'm gonna let this go another 10 minutes. Oof. This is pretty. Okay, we are starting to clear. Slowly, like it's getting translucent. I am, however, this is when we're gonna go big. And I'm just gonna add a ton of vinegar, just to help things along. Like the yarn mop has been absorbing some color, but if you think about it, gosh, what? So we've used 2 tablespoons here, 2 tablespoons there. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 tablespoons. 7 times 15 is about 105 milliliters. So really, the total amount of dye that we've had should still be well within the range that our yarn mop could absorb all of it entirely. And be at a 1% DOS. Now, I mean, different colors have different intensities, blah, 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 but it's not that the skein is overloaded with dye unless like our black has gotten way more concentrated or something. But that is just something to keep in mind. But now we have enough acid, and with time, things should absorb. So I think I'm gonna leave the heat on. And I've raised the heat a bit. I think we'll leave the heat on for 10 more minutes, and then we'll turn off the heat and let things cool off in the pot. Never forget the elements that you need when it comes to dyeing yarn. Says your dyeing teacher here. The elements are not just the acid, but it's also the temperature. So raising the temperature may be what we needed, but you can see we're definitely starting to clear. I'm gonna turn off the heat and just let it cool off here in the pot. But yeah, if your color's not absorbing, the things that you can do are increase the acid, increase your heat, or increase your time. And sometimes some colors need a little combination of all 3. Anyway, we'll let this cool completely, and once everything is cool, we'll come back and wash all of the yarn. Here are the wet colorways. I think the one I'm the most excited is still this disc. You can see how the colors feel lighter around those edges, and I mean, it feels like the lid that I wrapped it on held up pretty well. The hand-wound ball, we've seen that before. I'm excited for this as well, but it's funny how loose it is. These also look so interesting. I think we could get some really cool semi-repeating stuff because when I was winding this, I was going back and forth. But you could have wrapped this more in a gradient. You could wrap it and then scooch it to the bottom and wrap more and scooch it to the bottom. So we could definitely explore more about that in the future. The flat stick feels a little bit like the disc in that it seems like we've got more resist on the edges than on the flat spaces. And it feels like it might be more consistent going around these tubes, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna do my best to go and just rinse these off quickly in some lukewarm water and then hang them up to dry. I can put these two through my spin dryer. I can't put the sticks through my spin dryer, but the layers are shallow enough that I think with some pat drying with a towel, I should be able to let them dry before we unravel them. And goodness, I think my plan for all of these is to wash them after we have skeined them up because that's the best thing to do. And our beautiful yarn mop, I will go ahead and wash with soap and water off camera. If I notice any significant bleeding, I will pop back in though. I didn't see any bleeding anywhere, but the spin dryer did do interesting things to our little disc. Look at these resists. Woo! The yarn is all mostly dry now. Roseanne, I'm really excited with the way these colors interplay together, yet are such different techniques. Now what I need to do is go off camera, unravel each of these, so then we can see what kind of resists we got from the way that the yarn was wrapped. They might all end up looking pretty similar, but I think that's okay, and I think that, I don't know, I know that I'm really, really excited to go and look at all of them together. Here is all of Roseanne's yarn unraveled. I'll go into it more in just a moment, but first, it might be hard to see, but do you see these red spots? There are some of those red spots in both of the skeins that we wound around the PVC pipe. At first I thought maybe it was some breaking, but I think we actually did get some pigment off of the PVC pipe itself. So if you want to do this yourself, and that is something that you want to avoid, you could wrap the pipe with some plastic wrap in advance to protect your yarn from whatever technique you're doing. So I think my favorite of these techniques is actually the lid. And I will be inserting some photos from a midpoint when I was unraveling each of the things, except for I think the ball of yarn. I didn't take one there. But the lid gave a unique pattern all the way through, and I would be really interested to keep going and do more of a ball. I'm curious to do a comparison of that lid wrap versus just a hand wound ball and see if we see more differences. It's very possible we wouldn't, but at least at this stage where the lid was, there was more resist around that outside edge and where things crossed in the middle. So even with more yarn, there's a potential that the dye could penetrate that center somehow while still leaving those resist points. Here we had our small pipe, our big pipe, and then that wooden stick. I think the blue is fairly pastel, so it's a little harder to see right now, but I noticed similar resist from that edge, from that corner, like what we saw with the lid. There's more of a gradient and there was more resist in the purple on the smaller PVC pipe, just because the yarn was able to layer on top of itself more. On the thicker pipe, it was more spread out, so we got more color penetrating to the center, and so the gradient here is the most subtle. I suppose maybe the lid is fairly subtle. It looks more variegated than a gradient, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that, Roseanne, I am really, really excited by these colorways. And thank you so, so much for sponsoring this video. I really appreciate the suggestion to go about this and to look at mini skeins. It gave me this excuse to play around with these techniques I was interested in doing anyway. Again, I think the one I'm most likely to try again is that lid. Not only was it the easiest to wrap, it was just as easy as the hand wound ball, but I think the effect is extra cool. I absolutely want to play around with more traditional Shibori techniques to dye fabric in the future. I think it's so cool the way colors penetrate with the folds, and the types of patterns that you can create are fantastic. And who knows, maybe I'll try to couple these with dyeing some yarn at the same time. Like, we may as well use yarn to wrap the fabric around the stick and sort of scrunch it up. There could be a cool, like, extra bonus of creating some fun mini skeins. I also want to say that I have never seen any color come off of these PVC pipes when I have wet set, say, some hand spun yarn on them. I think that this transfer happened because of the heat element to all of this and the prolonged exposure of the yarn to the plastic with heat and time and vinegar and everything. Sometimes I get some questions about the point of mini skeins, and there's a lot that you can do. In this case, we wanted to play around and test a few different techniques, and so using minis is a great way to see how much you like or don't like doing a doing a different technique. But when I do a lot of like amigurumi and like small toys, having minis in a bunch of different colors comes in handy. I don't always need 100 grams of a particular colorway. Sometimes I just need a couple of yards. And so it's breaking down your skeins and playing with different techniques is fun and can come in useful depending on what you want to make. Roseanne, I hope that you will find all of these really interesting. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you all enjoyed this video, please subscribe, press that bell icon to turn on notifications, and let me know below what you think. Which one of these techniques is your favorite? Which one do you want to try in the future? I've already made it abundantly clear which one I think is the coolest. Although, I suppose I should also say the hand-wound ball of yarn is fun and amazing and a fantastic gradient tool. If you want the colors to penetrate more, start off with almost no vinegar and give it time to soak that color in. If you want to support the channel in other ways, I have tons of links in the video description, affiliate links for tools and equipment that I use in my videos, plus my Etsy shop, my Patreon, and we have a tiny bit of merch over on Zazzle, so you can go and check that out. Above all else, I hope that I was able to make you smile and give you a relaxing escape from everything that is going on right now. I wish all of you lots of health, and yeah, I'm impressed that my kids have stayed quiet enough for me to film a bunch of conclusions right now. Oh, I almost forgot. There's one more thing I need to do before I go and ship this yarn to Roseanne. Well, besides editing the video. I am going to go and wash all of this yarn in some plain tap water with a little bit of dish soap because we couldn't really wash them as they were before. If there was any bleeding during the washing, I'll put a note up on the screen. Otherwise, I would assume that there was none. I'm not expecting any. I almost forgot the yarn mop. This layered color is a grayish, almost green. It is really, really pretty and fairly neutral, even though there's some beautiful hue shifts and a lot of tones in here. The yarn mop color is definitely in a nice contrast of the different colors that we used in this video. It's kind of fun how they all combined together. Granted, there weren't equal parts of all the colors going into the mop, but it's just fun to see them together. Once again, thank you so much for watching. And this time, it really is the end of the video. Bye-bye!